UX Design Bootcamps are all the rage these days. People are opting out of the traditional college route for their education, and they're going for things that are more bite-sized and focus heavily on the skills that they're wanting to get hired for. Sounds great, right? But there's a problem. A lot of people don't like boot camps. And if you don't like them and you haven't taken them, then you're probably worried about them. And listen, I get it. There's a few things that you should be concerned about when it comes to picking the right UX design boot camp. But the truth is that these can be a fantastic solution for gaining skills to get hired quickly. It's all about asking the right questions and knowing which bootcamp is right for you. Hey, welcome to the Self-Made Web Designer Podcast. My name is Chris. I am your host, and it is so good to have you here with us yet again. We've got a fantastic guest this week. Her name is Nechari Riley, and Nechari has been there and done that with boot camps. She went through one, she came out successful, she freelanced for a little bit, and then she got a full-time job and is crushing it. But before she dove into it, she asked a lot of questions. She did a lot of research. She didn't take their word for it. Their meaning the UX Design Bootcamp people. She did digging. She studied. She went to meetups, and ultimately, she found a way to pick the right one for her. And from her experience, she is helping us learn how to do that for ourselves this week in this episode. It's all about how to choose the best UX design bootcamp for you. And I can't wait for you to hear from her. But before we dive in, I gotta ask, have you subscribed to the Self-Made Web Designer Podcast? Have you left a comment and a rating? Doing that would be so helpful to this podcast, and it will also help other people find this podcast and sign up and benefit from guests like Nechari as well. So take a second and do that. But without further ado, adieu. We gotta make it sound more French when we say it. Adieu. Sorry for all you folks listening from France. I just butchered your language. Without any more waiting or hesitating, are you ready for Miss Nechari Riley? All right, here we go. Nechari, thank you so much for being on the Self-Made Web Designer Podcast. I'm super excited to chat with you today.
Yes, I'm excited to chat too. This is, as I told you before, my first podcast. So I am excited to just have a conversation.
Absolutely. So for everybody listening, why don't you give us a brief rundown of who you are, what you do today, and how you got from where you were to today, to now.
This is always the toughest part because who I am starts from, where I am in some senses. So I am currently a senior design researcher. I have been a design researcher for a few years now. And before that, I was a freelance UX designer / UX researcher, moving into focus on user research.
Awesome. So what did that path look like for you? You were freelancing for a few years and then you decided you wanted to go full-time career, or was there, I know there's a boot camp in your history, but what was that process?
So I never live a straight path or straight life. I have very winding roads to get where I want to go because I believe in a life that is fully tested and lived. So my journey into user experience actually starts with public health. So my specific background, my technical background is as a spatial epidemiologist. So I am not coming at this from traditional user experience. And that's part of when we get into the part of the conversation about boot camps, part of my motivation for doing one. So why spatial epidemiology and how did I get here to user experience research? Well, there are a lot of similarities. So I was a health advisor and I was a researcher under many different public health initiatives. And one particular initiative, I was living and working in Zambia, so in sub-Saharan Africa, on a maternal health project, saving mothers, giving life. So the purpose of that project was to reduce infant and maternal mortality by 50% in a year's time. But what we could do on that project was just like dream big to win big, as we were told. And so some of the things that I decided to do on that project were very aligned with where I saw public health going. So I'm like, okay, public health, like research can die in a report. It can die in your findings. Cranking out numbers and then having them sit in a report was the most depressing thing to me.
Yeah.
So, I always thought, okay, what are some fun ways that we can make this data come to life? So, the short story for that is I was able to using the data, identify particular points and develop a toll-free hotline for maternal health services or download code. I was really into tech at that time, but didn't know exactly where I saw it fitting into my life. But I'm pretty good. Like I'm a former philosophy student, so I'm pretty good with logic. So downloaded the code, translated that into paper prototypes that we then piloted out in the eastern province of the country. And it was time for me to go back into public health, but I didn't know what to do with all the information, all the cool things that I was doing. So public health was what I knew. I did not know user experience, did not have any idea user and experience in mind together. So I came back with the understanding that I would find some way of combining my love of like tech and science, health science. And so I came back to finish my master's, but this time with a specialization in geographic information science, because I was like, at least this would allow me to code, do some fun tricks, and also use the information. At the time, like when I was in Zambia, I used to bug a lot of the engineers, so they taught me spatial mapping. So they taught me the system, and I was like, I'm obsessed. Who knew I would love maps so much and statistics behind maps? And so I started on a new concentration within geographic information science and public health with a subspecialty in like maternal sexual health, reproductive health. And I was working at the time and I was doing all these infographics like for public health. I was so frustrated with public health. I was like, let me think of creative ways to express myself within like my public health classes. So I was taking graphic design courses in my public health course. People were just like, I don't know where you're going with this, but you're going like, do your thing. Because, I really don't understand. I was like, I'm trying to communicate health in a different way than we're used to. And infographics at that time or coding, websites, people would ask me to do particular projects that involve tech at my company. And I would go to all these coding events in New York. I'm based in New York. So I go to the tech ecosystem here is very, you can find a meetup on any day, most times during the day, especially in the evening. So I would go to different events. I'd go to hackathons. I don't know where I got the energy from to do work full-time, grad school, and go to all of these events. But then one of my coworkers pointed me to user experience. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this information. Pause. This is so cool. Let me learn it over time. Yeah. So this was around 2014 because I was in the middle of my master's and I was just like, I don't know if you've ever experienced that journey, but somebody tells me something that I think is cool and want to explore. I'm just like, well, the master's is getting done. This is my second go around. I have to do this master's, especially for my family. After disappointing them that I wasn't a doctor. So I was just like, come on, like give them the master's at least. So, and I also wanted to just learn more. So after I graduated, this was 2017, I was part-time in my master's. I had grown, like I knew that I was going to leave my company. But I didn't know when. And that also made me very nervous because it was a golden handcuff situation at my work. You know, the way that this society is set up is your healthcare, your other benefits are tied in with your employer. And I was just like, you know, when you hit your stride in many ways, do you want to risk that? But I knew I had to. And so I was just like, okay, what's the quick, you know, if I plan this, what's the quickest turnaround for me to um, become who I see myself becoming? So once I started learning more about user experience design and like the interactions, also just speaking with people and seeing their ideas come to life, not just my own, you know, not just what the research says, not just what my team says, but like people's voices coming to life through the products. That's when I looked into the immersive course that I took. So that particular course was at General Assembly. I looked at so many different courses. I know we could talk about how I vetted those. But I did that because my coworker took that course. And so that was what was familiar to me. Also, I kind of had a sweet deal in terms of like getting a hookup on a discount.
Nice. Always helpful.
Yeah. And I also connected with the way I went to the, what is it called? The open course night. I'm blanking out on the actual name now. But I was really impressed with my teacher specifically. At that time, I had read so many reviews. I am a very, 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 very deliberate person. So I heard all sorts of reviews, mixed reviews about how people perceive boot camps and things like that. And then I was just like, you know, if I strategize, I can do this in a way that makes sense for my previous experience and moving into where I saw myself going, user research, and using design within research specifically. And so I did the boot camp, finished the boot camp, started working with a client during that time, which came out of a referral from one of my buddies who was in the boot camp as well. And then started working with, when I was freelancing, I was working with smaller organizations because that for me, like I knew a lot of, I'm a busybody. So I knew a lot of like nonprofits. I knew a lot of social impact organizations, and I worked with those on different creative projects. And I saw myself as a user experience designer. Research at the time, I mean, really, when you say user experience design to people, they get it a little bit more than user research in terms of like value for their business. And then I was like, I'm going to sneak in some user research too. You know, like
Yeah.
I'm going to show you what this, you know, well-informed decisions, what are those?
Yeah, right.
And so I did the freelancing for about a year before I landed my, I would say, a dedicated position for user research specifically. So I've been in user research since then.
Well, such a cool and interesting story. And the thing that I love about most of the people that I talk to on the podcast is that there's really no direct line from like, I'm going to be a user experience. And I knew that I was going to do that in junior high. And then here I am today, you know, like even Jessica Gaddis, who's been a guest on my podcast, who actually connected us. She started in journalism and then made her way into user experience. So it's really fascinating, like the background from health. And I think it gives you like a really unique perspective. So let's talk a little bit about that kind of the decision making aspect, because I get questions about boot camps all the time, and there's such a mixed bag of, some people love it, some people are like, don't do them, they're a scam. But you went for it. What was it that ultimately helped you to make that decision?
I think well, there's not one key thing that helped me make that decision. Because I mean, in my life, there wasn't one key thing. But I think the things that helped me make that decision that also aligned with my purpose was in just like so the first thing with my work, I'm going to get really real, and I have no NDA behind this,
Let's
but
do it.
I mean, I just didn't really I saw my career at the organization I was with ending. Like, I mean, it wasn't really a career, it was a job. So I had been in public health at that time for 10 years. I never really see myself out of it. I keep up with it. I have a whole bunch of people, my friends are in public health. Like, I never, and the other thing is, public health has shaped me so much that there's absolutely no way for me to leave public health. And so the thing that I see user experience as being able to amplify the skills that I already learned. So I was already doing interviews. I was already, expand or launching surveys. And so I was already a mixed methods researcher, just in another discipline. So for me, for me, the switch wasn't that major. It was another way of thinking about solving a problem or a set of problems. I feel like we all have, say what you will about people's existences on Earth, but I feel like we all have our purposes. And I feel like there's this piece of the puzzle that we're all tinkering with. There's this major puzzle that we can't see, and we have to find, or we're looking for ways for us to work with our piece of the puzzle that we were born with. And so I'm essentially trying to solve my piece of the puzzle. How can I actually meet people where they are and help them help identify the things that they are interested in, engaging with, and that actually solve problems that they have identified, not just, me and a team of removed researchers that could identify those issues and solve the most pressing problems in different areas and different communities. I true to my gritty New York spirit, I like to get in the dirt. I'm an avid gardener. I like putting my hands in the dirt. I like cultivating. I like growing things. And I feel that way about research. I feel that way about cultivating different experiences that really change people, that really resonate with them, that make them want to change themselves, less so than, the product changing them. It's what the discipline calls human-centered design and what I call people-powered.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love how philosophical we're getting, and it's got to be from your background. It's awesome.
I was a philosophy major, so there's that.
Here we go.
It never goes away. Nothing ever goes away.
No, and honestly, we talk about that a lot on this podcast, about like this hunger and the deeper purpose behind what it is that you're doing with a career. And that was a huge motivation for me getting started into web design, into UX design as well, from a little bit of a different angle. But it's the kind of thing, especially if you're going through a boot camp or if you're learning on your own, you have to have that piece that motivates you to keep going, because like you said, you had some of the pieces of the puzzle for this already, and that helped you make that decision. And I think that lends itself to understanding that if you go through a boot camp or you don't, you're going to have to put the puzzle together on your own, as well as gather as much information from the boot camp as well. And that's been a lot of the feedback that I've heard from people who have been to boot camps or people who even haven't, that said, you're not going to get everything that you need from this boot camp. Like, you're not going to be able to go, hey, I was in a boot camp, and so I'm 100% ready for any type of UX job that you've got. And so that sounds like that was exactly your experience as well.
Yeah. I mean, you'd also be surprised how many people bank a lot on it. And I'm like, bank a lot on yourself. And, it's just like, why do some people go to higher education? Like, why do some people go to college or do grad school? If you go there without, a purpose, it'll be a very tough road. You can finish it, but what is your actual purpose in going? I mean, outside of the joy of education, but you have to think about, even if it's not directly tied to the financial incentive of getting a job, or directly tied to the material thing where you can say, hey, I'm moving into becoming a UX designer, UX researcher. Like, what are the things that you want to learn? What are the problems you want to solve? And how does this particular course or this particular education get you started on that? I'm a lifelong learner. So I tell people, like, you never stop learning.
And ultimately, I think it sounds like the advice that you're giving people is, if you're going to be successful, there has to be more reason than just finances for becoming a UX designer and going through boot camps and coming out the other side ready to have that fulfilling career.
Absolutely, because the other thing is, it's more than that, because I always tell people, can you see yourself doing this for 8 hours out of a day or longer? Like, I mean, let's be real, longer than 8 hours out of a day. There's something it's beyond, it's not even really passion. It is passion, but it's a combination of things. It's like staying curious. First, being curious and staying curious, because the way for you to get better is for you to have this thirst for knowledge that, leads you to continue learning about the discipline. It's something where, like, I didn't get better as a public health researcher until I would sit, like, especially when I was on a pilot project for maternal health. I was like, what do I know about maternal health? But I just asked my boss at the time, I was like, give me your books. She was an OBGYN. I was like, give me all the books you can. Let me sit down and read this. And I absolutely grew fascinated with it and absorbed all of the information in order for me to, like, we were launching a survey. So I was like, this survey has to come correct, because, like, if it doesn't, guess who, it's not even really the system, because within, like, behavioral research, it's like, okay, at what step did this fail? I didn't want to keep talking about, like, steps that failed. So I'm just like, okay, how can I absorb so much information that we launch a survey that actually answers the question on the first try? So given that example, I take, and it might just be me being type A, which kind of never really left. But I take that as a thread into my own life. I can never settle for what I already know. I always ask myself, I'm like, okay, now that I know this information, what more do I need to know? And it's like this continuous process. It sounds exhausting, and it is, but it's, for me, I'm just like, it's a joy where I get to, like, learn more. And that's something that really helped me out when I was in the boot camp as well.
And it sounds like you've got a perspective for the long game when it comes to your education. And I think a lot of times with boot camps, especially the way that they're marketed, is like 6 months and you can have a full-time career in a happy tech startup or whatever. But I feel like that's kind of selling people short, because if you're going to be successful for the long haul. You have to be prepared for the long haul. You've got to be prepared to put in the hours that nobody's seeing, to having years and years of study before you finally make a breakthrough, for constantly adding to skills and constantly refining skills. And that's more than a 6 months boot camp and you're ready for the world to make hundreds and thousands and millions of dollars.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's more than that. It's identify the noise and cut it out. So like when you were saying marketing, like all the marketing materials, that never factored in my equation because I already knew what it was. Like you already know what these are. Like if you're even if you're a nonprofit organization, like a nonprofit university, you'll still see you'll see like these diversity images and come change the world. It's like, okay, whatever. I was the first person to like look at the catalog and I'm like, okay, let me look at all the classes, see for me to identify majors, see which, what are the classes that resonate with me the most? That's the major that I'm going to do. What's the course outline? What are the additional requirements, electives that I need? How can this put me on a particular path? Because the other thing is like, at the time, like for undergrad, like I was pre-med at the same time. So I had to slot everything in, make sure I had time for activities. And I was also workaholic at a very young age. So I'm like, yeah, how many jobs can I also fit in at the same time? So, taking that into my bootcamp experience, it was the same thing. I was like, forget all this noise. All this stuff doesn't matter to me. I requested every single course outline from every boot camp in my area and also online. It's amazing how much has changed even in the past 2 years. So even at the time, there weren't as many. And there were also some that aren't here anymore, So I've been to so many events. So my local, General Assembly is everywhere. So my local General Assembly in New York was extremely active in the tech community. Like they would always host events and things like that. So I was like, oh, okay, y'all are actually nice people who I don't feel, get on my nerves. And then when I went to an open house, I was like, this person knows their stuff. So I'm putting both, do I like you? That's important, especially when you're under a time-constrained education setting. You might deal with stress, and how you deal with that stress is important. And the people around you, when you are stressed out, are very, very important. Are you in a supportive environment? That sort of thing. And then for the instructor, I've had different instructors in my life. Is this instructor compatible with my learning style? Do I like that instructor? Are they answering my questions in a competent way? Not everybody can say that. Do they have a background and experience in what they are teaching? Or is this a hobby for them? Is this just side money? And it's not to say that people who do it on the side aren't dedicated. I understand that. So that's just me, inserting that. However, those were the main categories of things that I was looking for. And I completely disregarded that whole, I know a lot of it. I disregarded the whole financial aspect because, yet again, I knew my primary questions that I needed to solve through the career change. And because of the particular things that I wanted to explore, I was just like, okay, like, no matter what I do, if I aim myself for success, instead of measuring it on what a particular, because the thing is, the salaries also just vary so much. You can go on like any of these salary comparison things. Like, what if I, like eventually with my goal working in social impact work, typically helping society doesn't pay as much as like a big tech company. Like there are some exceptions, but so what are you going to do then when your salary varies on that? And you were looking at the average, because what they show you for that marketing material are averages. And also those are averages, those are reported averages, right? So they have unreported averages. And so that's the thing that people don't necessarily think about when they're looking at the marketing materials, instead of just focusing on like what are, comparing the syllabi. Who has a stronger syllabi? Who are the instructors? What is their industry experience? What are the hours? How many assignments are you doing? Are these assignment, what's an example of an assignment? What are the deliverables? What can I eventually show to, what can I eventually develop in order to show that I'm moving towards my goals? Not even like, we can talk about like case studies and portfolios or whatever, but like, what will I feel most proud of after this is all said and done? Because you have a portfolio and be like, yeah, so I did this project and it was like my third. Like, you are obviously not so enthusiastic about this. Like, all the portfolios, all of the case studies in my portfolio are something like I talk too much. Like, my case studies are actually probably too long, but I don't care.
I want to take a second and tell you about a free course that I have available at selfmadewebdesigner.com. Over 1,000 people have been through this course, and I am talking about the Web Designer Starter Kit course. I map out in 4 videos that you get through email all the steps that I took to get to where I am as a web designer. And I went from knowing absolutely nothing. I was clueless to, in 2 years, doubling my income with a freelance web design side hustle. I made this because I know you can be successful doing the same thing. And the Web Designer Starter Kit course is the first step for you on your journey to being a successful, thriving freelance web designer or having a full-time career. So I can't wait for you to check it out. Go to selfmadewebdesigner.com and sign up today. Talk a little bit about like researching some of the instructors and things like that, because the websites that I've been to, even with General Assembly, like you kind of have to dig for that information a little bit. So how did you meet your instructors before you were in the boot camp, or was it like you got an instructor and then you said, hey, I don't like this person, or I do like this person? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So for the first, to answer your last question first, I did select the instructor because I went to that class and I was like, when's the next time, this person is teaching? And I was like, oh, okay. So now's the time. Gave a few weeks notice at my job. Bye, y'all. Also going to Google I/O. Anyway, came back and started the camp because I was just like, I don't know. Sometimes you just never know. And you have to, I was in a place at that time, financially and also with my work coming to a close, that I decided, like, I already knew I was leaving. I just was waiting for the right time. It was the perfect time then, especially once I found my instructor. And how I found my instructor was by going to that in person. Like, I was going to different events at the boot camp, because they had a list online, and when you were just talking about like digging into, like, some of these things are hard to find. Well, I am a digger. Like, I I will find a way. I will dig for the information. So typically, other than like, once you get to the specific course and you go further down the page, that's when they try to like sell you on it. Like, that's a lot of products are like that. Like, they give you a little taste, like they'll put a little image, a little graphic, some text, like however many sentences, that really don't tell you much of anything. Show you a sample of instructors, show you a sample of outcomes. Don't care about any of that. Scroll all the way down. Then, request more information. I was like, all right, I'll put my information in, see what you give me back. And I actually requested that syllabus multiple times because I would forget it. Or sometimes I was like, maybe I could hack this syllabus, like I've done it with coding boot camps before. Like I've gone to courses, like I've paid for courses, but like I've never gone to a coding boot camp, because the other thing is, like, one of the big differences is there's a lot more educational information for coding than there is like UX. It's getting better, but you're not going to find the UX version of Free Code Camp. I mean, close to it, but it's more visual design focused. Yeah, and I did that for like a number of other boot camps as well. So I think at the time, what else? There was like this New York Coding Academy. They had something going on. They recently shut down. NYU had a program, but universities have to tack on a whole bunch of fees, so you have to take those in mind. And I'm trying to think how many other, but I just sometimes I would just like reach out to info at whatever, and I'm like, hey, can I get your syllabus? And they're like, yeah, we'd like to sell you things. I'm like, not today, like
Yeah.
So that's typically how I would find the syllabus. And old habits die hard. I'm so sorry for the trees, but I would print them out. And then I would highlight the differences on each like I'm a visual person. So that's how I did it. And yeah, so that's part of how I compared and found the program.
That's great. And it makes sense that you have found success because you were so diligent even before you said yes. And I'm always surprised when people jump into a boot camp and they've really not even done half of the work. Because this is a big investment, like we're talking tens of thousands of dollars in a lot of cases. And some of them are much cheaper, but if it's not a big investment financially, it's a big investment with your time and your energy, which is just as important. Yeah. So you mentioned looking at, different universities versus boot camp. What was the deciding factor between doing a boot camp or maybe going back to a university and getting some more education in a more traditional field?
Oh, this is where I'm going to probably make a lot of people sad, but I don't like formal education. As much as I'm in it, as much as I seek it, I say that now, and then you're probably going to be questioning me later, like, why are you in a PhD program? I thought you said, and it's like, sorry, I'm addicted to learning.
Yeah, for sure.
So I didn't, because I found the other programs surprisingly a little bit more superficial than I wanted. I kind of wanted more, I wanted a broad range of learnings that were even within the syllabus. Like, I think what helped me decide was my instructor was really into user research, like always advocating for it in every part of our process, and not just like superficially advocating. It's like, all right, so we're going to discuss this particular research topic and how you're going to incorporate it into user experience design. And I was like, I choose you, So with the other programs, I thought that they were more, all of this is very general and introductory. You're not going to get everything in 3 months or 6 months. But it came down to time and also what I was learning. So for me, I thought a good compromise would be a short course that packs a lot in. I was like, okay, so I'm not going to have 3 months of sleep. Fine. I've done that before. I've had 3 years of no sleep before. So what's 3 months? And so I was just like, okay, well, it was like really banking on the instructor though, like for real, outside of that, and the receptivity. in terms of like the questions that I asked. And I'm like, the other thing, the huge thing about it, which I've also mentioned, is going back into the university setting. I was like, okay, just do I want, if I'm going back to a university setting, am I getting another master's? Like, I thought that the price of the course, with it was a short, yeah, it was an immersive course, but it was also quite short, the one that I was looking at, for the amount of cost. And I knew the reason why, like, they had to put it that way because the university taxed on a million different things. And I was just like, well, yeah, that's a no from me. So if I wasn't going to do another master's degree, then let me just do the short course, which is more like a certificate that I can just build upon the skills. I don't care if I get a certificate or not. I just needed those particular skills that I could build upon.
And that's good too, because I think, a lot of people before they step into any kind of tech career, whether it's development or UX design or whatever, they think that a piece of paper has a weight to it with an employer, but you get in the world and you're like, okay, this doesn't matter at all. Even when it comes to, I mean, some people, some companies like you having a degree, but most of the people that I've talked to, they're like, I don't want to see your degree. I want to see the projects that you have done.
I mean, that's absolutely true. I mean, first, can anybody understand my degrees? I've always had to explain them. It's like, how did you get there? I mean, you have your unicorns that are like, I totally get you, and I was like, I love you forever. But I often dealt with people who I had to just explain so many whys. So I was so used to explaining that's a part of the reason why I was just like, filter out the noise. A certificate to me is noise. You know how many certificates I have? Like, but what's the thing that carries with me the most? The skills that I learned. It's not, what's a piece of paper? So I need to have that knowledge of what I'm doing. And it's also about that product. Can you speak about it? Are you just regurgitating what you learned? That sounds awkward when you're speaking to somebody and it's like, I referenced this recently, but it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie with Luke Wilson, Idiocracy, where he's like, why are you watering the lawn with Gatorade? And it's like, because it's got electrolytes in it. Because they're not really thinking about why they're doing it. Like, don't be that person where you're just like regurgitating like what you've heard as a benefit. Like, think about why did you do it? Like, why did you spend so much time working on this project? What did you learn from that? Why are all your projects the same? Why are they all different? Do you have a theme going on, or do you what is the purpose of what you're doing?
Being intentional about the portfolio that you're building.
Do everything with intention. That's what Solange says.
Well, let's transition a little bit away from the boot camp into your first steps into the career world. So what did freelancing for that first year look like for you? Was it all word of mouth, referrals that you got from the projects that you were getting, or what did that look like?
Yeah, it was all my connections. I'm going to be very real with you. So we were on our last project and I was working with a particular team. And one of my teammates received an opportunity to work with the company that we were working with for the last project, like our final project. But she wasn't able to take that particular job. She got another job. So she was like, hey, are you open to working with them? I was like, oh yeah, I'd love to. So that's actually how I started. I started maybe 3 weeks or so after the boot camp ended. And so I was working on that project for a few months. And then, so that got me started. And then what helped me going was They don't know this. They don't need to know this. They're probably, who knows? But the benefit of people working in co-working spaces while you're on site is like you network with so many people. But I mean, the thing is, it's beyond networking. Like, you just meet so many cool people, and people want to show you what they're working on. There are a lot of startups who work in like co-working spaces. Or like I would just go to particular events. Like the UX design events were specifically for the joy of UX. But the general tech events, like I would meet people that like, yeah, we have this startup and we have these like questions we want to solve. How can we get you involved? I'm like, let's chat about it. And so they would show me like their demos or different things that they were interested in talking with. And sometimes I was just like, sometimes I would just like advise them about particular things if I just saw it as a one-off instead of an engagement. Like you are assessing people just like they're assessing you. Like, because you don't want to take on a project that you're like, you're not meeting their needs. You have to also think about that because you don't want to do more harm than good.
So it sounded like there were plenty of opportunities out there for you from the relationships that you were building, from the relationships that you had in the boot camp. And then you were just kind of filtering what worked best for you and what would be a best fit for the companies that were looking to have help. Did you find that that was a lot of people's experience from the boot camp or from the class that you did together, that they didn't have a real tough time finding work after the boot camp was over?
I think it was mixed. While I was freelancing, it wasn't like I was freelancing because I was trying to find like a full-time job. So I was also, I mean, the reason I know freelancing works for some, and I've freelanced before, but for me, it's really exhausting. Like, I don't want to chase people. I'm not a chaser. I'm like, can you stand still? Can we just like stand still at this moment? Can we have a long-term like goal or relationship? Like I still work with particular, projects now. I would say as more an advisor or just like more one-off things. But freelancing, because of the nature of sometimes people feeling like there's like this never-ending engagement, or then they don't really understand UX design. They want you to become a webmaster, and I'm like, no, this is not gonna happen. So for my counterparts who were also in that, I think results were mixed. Like the majority of my intake or like my cohort did receive positions within maybe by the 4th or 5th month. Some of them even had positions right out of the class, because they would either go to the on-site career fair, or like they would connect with people at different meetups that they would go to. Like my class was super busy. Like we were always on like, if the measurement was 10, we were always on 15. Like there's no one that did not have a goal in mind, even for those who were just like, I'm not finding what I'm looking for. And so like some people relocated, but that process was maybe a few months.
Yeah. So it sounds like as much as they say a job is guaranteed after a boot camp, there's you still have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I don't know who said that first. I don't know who said jobs were guaranteed. They are absolutely not guaranteed.
Right.
Because the other thing is just kind of like when you're job searching is a full-time. Looking for a job is a full-time job. So that's what you're doing. I mean, you have career services there, but I mean, like, because so here's the other thing, which my cohort also said was not important, but to me it is. I was the oldest person in my cohort at the time. Well, second oldest. And so that lends itself to like you doing your resume a million times, interviewing a million times. Like my prep is essentially me having a conversation because I've done so many interviews. So the person that was doing my career services, I was just like, we would brainstorm, but essentially the work was mine to do. So while I could have them review things, for me, I was just like, okay, whatever. Like, this is nice. Like, you can, I guess, check the errors, but really it's up to me finding the next opportunity. And that involves making a plan. You're testing it out. What types of positions am I looking for? What am I willing to accept too? Like, think about you changing a career or you starting in a new career. What are your expectations? So while the user experience positions that are out there are a random bag of mess in terms of qualifications, we see this across different industries anyway. So there is nothing special about it. But, it's kind of like I've never seen a baby quail. And I've never really seen too many junior positions, especially not now. So while you're trying to think of the non-senior positions to apply to, sometimes in your experience, you might want to apply to them, shoot your shot if you meet the majority of the qualifications anyway. But you're not going to apply for like VP. Well, some might.
Yeah.
But, depending on your experience, everybody came in with like different experience. Some people were already like visual designers, graphic designers. Some people were engineers already. Some people had already had significant experience. And that's what, like this particular course helped them. So it's your previous experience, matching it up and finding those particular positions. But if you're coming in like blank slate, right? Go for the positions that match your skills.
Right. Yeah.
And experience. So focusing on like more entry-level positions. I do not include internships as entry-level positions, unlike many people, because I think internships are internships. So, like positions that say junior or positions that say nothing. And then you find out later, oh, actually we wanted somebody with 15 years of experience. And it's like, you're weird. Okay. So it's like you experimenting and seeing what works, what doesn't, tweaking it until you eventually, like, you just have to keep trying, just like when you're applying for another job.
You've hit on a lot of kind of the tension with people who are looking to hire UX designers and people who are looking to be hired as UX designers. There's junior level positions with 3+ years of experience, which it's like, well, that's not really like, I mean, yeah, it's not 5+, it's not 7+ years, but it's still not junior, So, and I think there's this real, like UX is kind of working itself out, right? Like it's still a young field. In comparison to health and medicine, it's still a young field. In comparison to blacksmithing, which has been around for centuries and centuries. And so like we've just started calling ourselves different things, and so when I look at different job postings, it's like, you don't really need a UX designer. You need like a marketing designer. Like that's really what you're looking for. Or you don't need a UX designer as much as you need a product designer or as much as you need a researcher. So there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to figuring out, like, number one is what they're asking for, what they actually want. And number two, do my skills line up with what they're actually asking for? And then maybe we can work out the job title later on or whatever.
And I mean, you also have like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You also have the perception that boot camps would be. So, a lot of people talk about the oversaturation. Like, first, let's be real. Like, I was actually trying to find the article to send you, or at least mention it. But there was some research survey that was done on like the state of UX, maybe about a year or two ago, where the majority of people are actually self-taught. So somebody's lying. I'm just saying. So, I also understand the limitations of research where that was just one report. But guess what? They don't have anything else to base it off of. So there we are. But even with that, because of those particular perceptions, you have some people that, especially if they have gone through more formal training, like a bachelor's, master's degree, or something else, university oriented, they might feel some type of way about somebody thinking that they would be getting a particular position where they have worked so hard in terms of length of study and depth of study, which is very odd because I never had that sentiment when I was in public health. Anyway, that being said, that's why I always say emphasize your continuous learning. Because when you are showing that, like, come on, this is just, not to completely disregard your experience, because you built, like, I still speak to my cohort and we can ask each other anything. We still make aspirational plans, I'll say, because we can't go anywhere right now, but aspirational plans to meet up in the future and hang out. Like, we actually genuinely like each other. So I'm not trying to dismiss boot camps, but I also know the reality. I read a lot, and I hear, one of the things I always tell people to avoid is design Twitter, because it gets really weird with people who have, like, experiences that aren't their own, but they feel like expressing them. So it's like, I would never hire a boot camper. It's like, well, good for you, Johnny. You did that. And so you're just like, okay, well, if you're facing that, I mean, other than avoiding the organizations they work with completely, I mean, you can't really avoid every single organization that people are in, but working to develop your skills past the point where people obviously see, hey, this is not a fluke of, like, working within just a boot camp, or, like, what are the unique things that are a part of you? So you might see one particular project that was a passion project from my boot camp experience, but you'll also see the other things that I did along the way that are unique to my other particular research and design experiences. So finding ways that you stand out, like looking at different case studies. I have, some people have called me weird, but I collect people's case studies. Like, I bookmark them so that I can see, I'm like, okay, what worked well for this? What, like, what would I change? Ooh, this is really unique. Some of those things I would never apply to my own, but I think it's something when someone feels like they can step out and just be unique and feel confident in being themselves, and shaping their own identity within user experience design, where people are always trying to tell you to fit into the mold in order for you to advance. So that's something that I apply within particular positions. I also try to meet my people, and by my people who understand, like, my lived experience, my wide range of interests, and how I won't let go of them. What I bring to the table. You do not want to work with one-dimensional people. Like, how people talk about, well, now maybe not, because they're like, diversity matters, but, like, or fake statements that are out now. But how people talk about, like, we just want to see, in terms of fit. Like, well, guess what? Like, do I mesh with you and your philosophy for user experience? Do you develop products that I am proud to talk about? Will I do work and feel like I can, and DAs aside, that I feel proud of? Like, when I go home and when I rest my head on my pillow, I'm not worried that I am, like, developing a product that drops drones on countries, or, debilitates entire nations, or things like that. Like, some people don't care, they just want to work on cool things. I am someone that believes in the philosophy of design justice. You don't create harm. It's like the whole nothing about us without us. So how do you make inclusive products? So I want to align with organizations that believe in my personal values forget forget your like funnel, your application funnel. I don't really care about that. Nor have I ever received a job through an application portal.
Yeah. Maybe there's something to that. Yeah. No, that's great. And I think it's such good insight to understand the deeper things behind your actions and the purpose to it, because that essentially is what will help you stay in the game when you don't feel like staying in the game, because with anything that is, worth something at all, it's going to be challenging, and you're going to have seasons where you feel like giving up altogether. So the fact that you have this really great sense of this is what I'm about, and this is what I'm going for, is admirable. And I think it's something that everybody can learn from. So, and Nechari, I thank you so much for being on the Self-Made Web Designer podcast. I feel like we could just keep talking about this stuff for hours and hours.
And I'm just like, part 2, or just emails, or whatever.
We'll do it. We'll do it again. We'll get you back on, and we'll keep talking about it. But if anybody wants to connect with you outside of the podcast, where would they go?
It's a little dormant right now because it's a lot, but Twitter, where I say the most random things, either about TV, pop culture, my lived experience, or sometimes user research. So Twitter at Nechariism, which is N as in Nancy, ECHARISM. You can also just look on my website if you're curious or you're just like bored, which is Nechari, N as in Nancy, ECHARI.com.
I love how thoughtful Nechari was when it came to picking the boot camp that was right for her. Not only did she try to pick the right boot camp, but she made sure that she got the right instructor. And that is so key when it comes to actually finding the UX Design Bootcamp that is going to be best for you. Within any bootcamp, there's going to be a myriad of different teachers who have different philosophies about how to teach and how students should learn. Just like in universities, you don't go to a university and expect every single professor to be the same. And the same is true with a UX Design Bootcamp. So the best thing to do would be to do your research, to look into the instructors, to ask other students what their experience was like before, during, and after the boot camp, to make sure that it is the right one for you. I know if you do that research, if you take that much time, you're going to be just like Nechari. You're going to come out successfully with a whole bunch of UX design skills that employers are going to love to hire you for. Man, what a great episode. Next week, we've got another one. It's going to be fantastic. I hope you're with us next week. You're not going to want to miss out. Wednesday night, midnight, it is happening. It is dropping, and we're going to party like it's 1999. Hope to see you there. Until next week, don't forget, if you don't quit, you